Consistently so far, this mangaka has had a really good display of action and style when it comes to 1v1 fights. For any of the early series matches, like say like just like the first couple Demon Lords, I think it's really hard to see like the talent that this guy has when you go with just like stuff like fighting the the other Sada or fighting Mado or anything where it was obviously Kiyoshi just running through stuff. You don't see the level of just kind of like styled combat that this manga ends up having. And the Azudaroth fight really put it out on display, I think, for the first time in full. We would just see it in bits and pieces as powers and whatnot were used throughout the series. Because the only time up until then we really had much of a fight for Kiyoshi, it really was Senpai. Senpai was it Senpai Yenma. He just was a like you know, adequate level of just Kyoshi put in a little bit of effort. It wasn't like just blitz and one shot, but still, it's not like he had to really try too much. And we've seen now with mostly like lower end people. Well, I say lower end, but younger people like Nihon Jack Joe, now Hitsugi, just skirmish again with Kyoshi and Hydrako. There's there's a really good. I think that once we see as well, more of the older character fights, like when we see the Sarugi fight, Sakaki's. I'm really hoping we see the other two dice rolls, and we know what all of his dice rolls are once we get to his fight. But I think once we get to that's another one too. It's not as much of a 1v1 that I'm hoping for and in conversation as it's say like again Kurose and Hitsugi, but with Yuta and Sakaki the first round, it just was a really cool styled level of combat and seeing just him just fight with the umbrella, but also in a direct style of melee punching style of assault. It just showed that the mangaka he has a really good talent, I think, at just having different styles of fighting with characters while making the characters themselves very fun themed and likable. So as it were, like I said, I think once we see Sarugi in his 1v fight with Tanjinchi, that'll be way more so again a more shown display of combat from an older generation of character within the verse and not just the younger people, because I think with the younger people there's a lot just of trying out new moves. In Nihon Jack Joe's case, they just don't have the combat experience at all. Hitsugi is pretty much just pulling out new moves all over the place during his fight, and I want to see some people that are just they're not going to be going into this as the underdog trying to grow their limits. Like maybe they get stronger in the fight, but they are already going into this as a seasoned veteran fighter, and I want to see what exactly their way of handling these matches are. But I was very happy to see at the start of this chapter that Hitsugi had another specific hand-styled motion with using the new technique that he got, Salamander, because I'm a big fan, and I mentioned that with when I talked about Sarugi. I'm a big fan of the crests and the different styles that each of them have these different specific hand sign techniques. I like when characters have that. I don't think every character should have some form of special iconic little thing they do with their hands or their eyes or whatever. I think it's cool when you have stuff stylized, and with the crests, how they have almost this. There's a style of where just applying your power and then just doing some cool hand motion that signifies some form of reference to how you're using your power. I think it's just really cool. I think it's just a neat mechanic that they have. And you see, like, say with with White Dragon, he just does one finger. I think there's just reference for me with like Jalal and the different numbers that he does for each finger for specific spells. But it's like you have White Dragon, you've got Leviathan. Now he's got like Salamander, where he does like this cool claw taking. Also, what was it, a Orochi, and just does like spread finger for like a shotgun attack. I thought that was really cool, because I'm curious to know what's gonna go on with his arm after this chapter. Like what's gonna go on with Hitsugi's arm, because it's not like in this chapter it says like, oh man, it's definitely 100% like I have to get it removed. with Kurose, he mentions that his cold does internal damage. It freezes from the inside and then goes outward. So I would assume the inside of his arm entirely was fully frozen over. The question is I wonder if they have a good enough healer that would be able to recover, like, full tissue damage. And it's like, oh yeah, I can undo this as long as the person themselves is still alive and the arm is attached or something. But you just have some more back and forth. He goes for Salamander as more of the larger, widespread attack version. And it seems like when he says like he's loading, which I think is really cool, like loading Salamander to White Dragon, the idea is he is taking the heat application of it and he is using it into White Dragon. So it's just the whole like mixing of ammo style with his is I think is really cool. And I'm hoping that the mangaka keeps his power very water specific, but just keeps letting him do these cool trick moves in ways that he is able to. Anytime that he develops a new way to use water in like a style, like if he developed a cold, ice version, cold, like just Arctic water, I guess. I don't know, when it hits, it freezes. And he's able to just like every time he unlocks a new ammo, it applies to all of his different shooting styles, and which that keeps it so each of his generally, I guess, maybe without Salamander maybe being an exception, because that one specifically is supposed to be like a high water temperature attack, whereas like with White Dragon it's a condensed high pressurized beam like a bit attack with water. You have Leviathan, which is like a giant mega water cannon. But I just think it's really cool because it plays into the whole idea of him having guns and the ammunition with it being interchangeable and all these different modifications. Hitsugi's character is really cool. I think that he fits so well into the verse as like this odd swap of positions that you would expect for the main character and his rival, to where like the rival is actually the known, very established and very clear, not as powerful one, but also has his own skills and talents and just different dreams and whatnot that he has got going on that keeps it so he's pushing himself and kind of like keeping up with the momentum of the main character as much as humanly possible, which makes him again a very just likable guy. He just seems to be trying really hard, even though that it's like Kiyoshi is just that much more talented and capable than him when it comes to fighting and stuff in the wide scope. He doesn't get mad about it, which I really like. There, at least as of right now, there hasn't been a conflict between like his feelings about like, oh yeah, well Kiyoshi's a nice guy. Why exactly would I, what reason would I have to be mad at him just because he's more powerful? He just seems to be like, oh, who cares about that? We're on the same team. We're in this to protect people. And I think with something like just eliminating the idea, the initial kind of seemingly premise of like there was only one cross paladin, so they aren't competing for a specific singular role. It just gives them no reason for it gives Hitsugi no reason for him to ever have any animosity for like any current reasons. You have to build up some reveal later on, but I don't know. But there was a really interesting bit with Kurose after Hitsugi goes for an attack, shoots, Kurose dodges, and there's like that whole like, well, why'd you dodge, man, if it wasn't so dangerous for you? And Kurose takes that seriously, and he starts talking about how in the human world, absolute zero is negative 460 degrees, but in the demon world, it's negative 868 degrees Fahrenheit. So apparently his power is now like once he activates his hands, like seemingly his cold around him directly, like around his whole body, is still like that 300, like negative 350, but just his hands, where this effect is, he has negative 868 degrees, which, so from what I know, is absolute zero, full loss of energy. It's just, it's a theoretical thing as far as I'm aware of. And everything beyond that, it's like still like, falls into the same category, but it's just like extra fiction, where it's just unless there's some crazy theory of negative 868 degrees Fahrenheit I've never heard about, which I would love to hear if so, then this is just crazy fictional numbers. Maybe it's a reference to something of like, you know, how many levels of are in the demon world, like how many floors of hell there are or something. And there's 869 and he's on the second to last one or something like that. That's the cold one. But I thought it was really cool that when he was demonstrating his powers, it was like he's just doing a flick, and it's not the force, it's just the cold air like moving through and just making contact with that tree. And you know, he gets his attacks upgrade for, what was it, icy death palm, or like icy death wave to icy purgatory palm. And there's this cool bit where it's like he grazes Hitsugi's arm, and the cold and frost just seems to, you know, exude out from it and freeze outward. And he's got that's where he reveals, he, you know, grabs onto his still covered arm and pulls it down to reveal another perfect blue crest, which I'm very interested in that as well, because if I like the idea of him having, obviously, I talked about this, I think, in the last review, that of like, I like him getting a second crest. I just am not sure of him having the same crest. But the thing is, if he has two of the same crest and both of his hands, like, he can just do the same exact techniques and same exact styles. But if he wants to, or he can mix and match all these different ones that he has at the same time, I think that would be really cool. I'm kind of hoping that, like, but the thing is, if his arm, like, if there's something actually, like, permanently done to his arm, I don't know. I think it's really early in the series to have something like that, but at the same time, I think it'd be really cool to see characters get damage, but don't take it as like, okay, now he's gonna have, you know, one arm for the rest of the series. It'd be like, he loses an arm, and similar to how Mako has her Exorcist gear, you give that to him, not the exact same one. You give that to something like him, and he has like a cool gun arm, and it would just be an upgraded version of his pistol. But maybe it just you know, maybe he's got like an Iron Man style, like he just shoots a pressurized water beam out of his hand. That'd be pretty sick. But give him something like that where he could have, you know, he takes a handicap, turns it into an upgrade. I think that would be really awesome. But let me pull out. I pulled that panel up too, so I wanted us to have it in there. Oh, hang on. Yeah, let me pull it. There's just the statement of negative 868 degrees Fahrenheit is pretty crazy. But I think that just like the display one of just like having that Orochi one real fast, where he just does this widespread attack just to kind of gap distance a little, because I think it's to show that, I think it's personally to show that Hitsugi was using his two arms for two different styles of guns. And maybe like on his right arm, it was going to be like wide ranged attacks and like multi-target hits or something. And that's why he just immediately went to a different style of attack when he did it. But I don't know. That's an assumption right now, but we'll see. If his arm is destroyed, I'm really hoping that we see, I'm really hoping we get like a statement of it before the arc's over, or early in between the next arc. I don't want it to be something like we have to wait until, like, you know, he's left unknown, he's being looked at by doctors, and it's like an arc later, like a, you know, half an arc later after this arc is concluded, and he's, you know, shows up with his arm healed, or he's got a cool prosthetic. I think a like combat prosthetic would be badass if he had this cool gun arm. But it was badass as well to see him combine. I love the style. I love just like the idea that like his crest is like he's just has two the same, but he's slapping them together. Goes for Ultra Leviathan with just this full in big beam. But I didn't think that was gonna be enough. You know, just because it's probably something he already had, and it's the most basic thing. It's just, you know, my last big attack, but doubled over, and it was great. I thought it was a great character moment to see, just as he's thinking what's going on. You know, he's, you know, doesn't want to lose his ground, doesn't want to budge, that he wants to beat this guy, to protect everyone, to do his job. And you see just the people that he's got just, you know, supporting him. You know, the people at the mansion, he's got, you know, the people on his team, he's thinking about his mom. And I thought it was really cool that, you know, you go through, like I said, you go through these different stages of the past. You have, you know, the you have the service workers that work at his house, but it's very clear from what we saw that he is a very respectable young man. He treats the employees that work for his family very well, and they all like him and think that he's just a good kid. That obviously it's people in the present from his past. You have his mom, who's somebody who is stuck the same way in his memory because she died. And then you have the people of the present, which is his team, which is also his future, though. And then having this, again, it's the style of, like, I always say core shonen, and I always said that, like, Black Clover, Mashal really well had like a core shonen style. I think that this series has a really good core shonen vibe to it, where it's just like he's thinking about just the different parts of the people again that drive him and move him to keep fighting every day. And it was that last moment where it's just like he thought right before the fight where he told Kiyoshi to go and to trust him. And it's just again it's this moment of like the guy that he is, he's on the same team, he's friends with, this is his rival, and he's like, but he at the same time he fully is aware that Kiyoshi is the way more capable, way more powerful, way more seen as as the next top cross paladin. Everyone's is aware of the prodigy Kiyoshi Hirai within like their whole general frame of world, to the extent that the demons are aware. And he's just he understands that, but at the same time he's like he talks to him more like he is a peer. And while doing that at the same time, again, like I said, he sees him as a rival, but he's like, he trusted me with this. This is something that I told him that I could handle, and I gotta handle this. And it was just really badass to see the style change too, where he just did the full open hand technique. You have like pretty much like the Big Bang Kamehameha style attack, where it just has that sick ringed orb that right out after that it's just spraying water, pressurize. A new one again, Jabberwocky, which the moves and the way that he names his techniques are all really badass. But Kurose, again, it's hard to dislike a villain like him. I thought he did really good. One, let me move Hitsugi for a second. One, just again, I talked about it when we initially had him show up, but his design is really cool. Just like the white suit, the black kind, second layer. I don't know what the feathery cloak kind of thing is actually called, but he just looks sick. And, the whole ice face cover, his eyes are like reversed with like black and white and stuff, probably like blue and ice, like silver. He just looks cool. But like and I've mentioned the antagonists are really likable in the series because he's like it's like Baku Yaraku. He mentions like you shouldn't have had a chance and you really consider yourself like a martyr or anything, but then he calls Hitsugi a hot-headed bastard, and then just he breaks and falls apart, and it is narrated that Hitsugi is the winner. So with even like at his dying moment, Kurose is he's not like mad about it. He seems like, damn, well, I guess you got me on this one kind of moment. That's what it comes off to me, at least. And like seeing that, it's like he has like a level of it's like that with stuff in movies and shows where it's like you have like mafia characters, but you have some that like are very honorable and will always go by a specific code. He gives off that vibe where it's like he's similar to Bakuyaraka, like I said, where he has honor and he was a warrior at the end of the day. Where it's like Tanjinshi seems to be a warrior, but like a warrior at all costs, like bloodlusty, crazy kind. Whereas like Kurose, he's evil, like he's a well, like you can't really say too much he's evil. Obviously he's a demon, they have a different world culture, but at the same time, it's like he clearly is a not nice guy, but at the same time, there are parts to him where he's at least grounded enough that he isn't delusional to a crazed, comically crazed degree. But anyway, other than that, I thought this was a really solid chapter. I mean, especially for Hitsugi's first, like full fight in the series. We've only really had shorter bits with him and showings and like chunks of fights. But now we had like our first actual direct battle. And I also will commend this mangaka on the fact that he sticks with the fights pretty well. And like I'm a big fan of like when you have a fight that you don't just, oh yeah, fight was started, this is what you're doing for the next 2 chapters. I'm a big fan of when you have fights set up and maybe you see a little bit of them and then it's time to go into them full, so maybe you have like a couple chapters scattered throughout prior events where you're seeing these 2 characters clash. And we're getting that pretty much right now. I mean, we just had all these last couple fights start up, but we didn't peer into any of those during this last set of 2 chapters. But it, at the same time, none of this felt like it was just done so for the sake of just having the scene. It was all done really well. So I'm pretty satisfied with this first of the top demon lords defeated. Kurose has been pretty cool. I assumed that I was gonna like the top 3. We'll see if Tanjinchi ends up surpassing Kurose, because right, Kurose I'd probably put as one of the at the top 3. I would put him probably at like number 3, maybe Bakuraku number 2, because I know Mukurojima, like, he hasn't really gone in full yet, but he is my favorite out of the demon lords that has been shown. I'm not counting Azunaroth either. He's his own kind of guy. But anyway, other than that, comment below. Tell me your thoughts about this chapter and your thoughts on Hitsugi and Hitsugi's whole cool moment. I'm sure that, you know, the one thing too is, like, I figured there was going to be some implementation on like an Arraign ability, because that was there was a whole note of it with that's how his mom fought. So maybe that'll be in the future, and that's just like you know, some form of foreshadowing. It's just like, hey, at some point he's gonna have a cool rain technique. He's gonna be like, you know, he's gonna have like wear a hat that every time he comes into battle it starts raining, and he has some cool lines, but you can't hear him because the rain is too loud. I can just imagine that, where it's like, it's just aggressive, but he's got such a sturdy type of hat where it's just super aggressive, hitting and splattering all around him in every direction. That'd be great. I think this manga is like a perfect type of humor for something like that, but we'll see. Anyway, other than that, comment below, tell me your thoughts are about this series, and tell me your thoughts about this chapter, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Bye.